share some insight into my experience in building data teams in different domains. And I have to say, I really love the sort of surroundings here with the wallpaper of famous mathematicians. Yes, here's the agenda. I'll very quickly introduce myself, and then I go through sort of the approach to solving data problems and building data products that I've kind of find useful, the hiring needed for that to really work, and the management speak that you need to put in place to convince management how you hire people and how you build your products. Good. So this is my family. I'm a background in mathematics and AI and games. I started my career in '96 as a Delphi developer. I hope you have used that awesome programming language. I built my first data pipeline to save some data from the scary Y2K bug in '99. I have some experience in banking in Iceland. That's an interesting experience. I've done sort of a lot of risk modeling there, apparently not working all the time. I worked for King, which is most famous for building the Candy Crush game. I also worked for H&M, which is a Swedish company, one of the biggest fashion retailers in the world. And currently I work for Sidekick, which is a company working in digital therapeutics, offering digital solutions for a range of digital therapy for a range of diseases. Good. I'm not claiming that I have the answer or the solution. This is just talk based on my learnings and what has worked for me. There are many paths to the goal, and there are definitely other ways to go as well. But this has served me very well. I've built data teams from scratch, both at King, H&M, and Sidekick. And so these are very different domains, very different maturities, and different cultures. All right, so I'll start with this. I'll just start with my first day at Sidekick Health. It was 1st of February, 21. It's a promising startup in digital therapeutics, founded by two doctors, Sami and Tryggvi. You can see the picture of them. It just recently got round A funding when I started. And as is very common, there was no data team, no data warehouse. The little data analysis that went on was just done by the CTO on the backend tables. I mean, this is probably very common. Okay, so where do you start? What do you do? First day, it's just, oof. I've been in environments where there is a sort of very mature data structure when I start. Here, there is nothing. What do? Do I build a data warehouse? Do I plan that first? Do I put event tracking in place? Do I think about building the data lake? Do I buy sort of reporting tools? Do I figure out what's the most interesting machine learning problem, and etc. So it's very exciting to go in and everything is fresh, but it's also a little bit daunting. Okay, where do I start? I have nothing. And what is very human is that once you start something from scratch, you think about, okay, what is the perfect solution? How can I make this awesome? But what happens is that building the perfect solution usually takes a lot of time. And in the meantime, the business is just blind. So, and once you finish your perfect solution, if there is a thing like finishing the perfect solution, and hopefully the company is still alive because it has been blind all the time, it's still possible that nobody really wants your perfect solution, or it's not really useful. So what we did was really, for the first 3 months, we deliberately just thought about, okay, we need to invest in knowing what to build. So we just gathered the most important data requests, and we had an OKR process in place, and we just put as the main key result, okay, for more than 90% of all the data requests we get, we just built a scheduled query or SQL query and built a data studio view on top of it. So the people asking for the data, they can repeatedly look at the data, updating every day. But of course, there is no infrastructure really there, and you just create a spaghetti code. So in 3 months, we had a lot of spaghetti, a lot of redundant SQL queries and all of that, but we're fine with that. We had gathered the knowledge about what's the most important data, and now we can build a simple dimensional model from the data we gathered. And there's still no infrastructure, it's still just running on scheduled queries in a Google Cloud environment. So today, what we were able to do with this, so the first version of the dimensional model that we built served the data scientists and business very well. they were not blind anymore. They could actually take decisions, informed decisions. We very quickly moved to DAX and DBT. If you don't know what that means, it's just more infrastructure, more robust environment. And today, this actually bought us time to take a step back and really build an advanced data warehouse with a sort of best-in-practice methodology. And it has actually become an important source of revenue for the company. We are partnering with pharma companies and insurance companies, and we are basically selling them insights reports based on this data, and we sell them aggregated de-identifiable data as well. Same approach in a different domain. At King, we wanted to see, and we didn't know if it was possible or not, to see if we could build a bot that could predict the difficulty of new levels. If you played Candy Crush, which a lot of people have, it's now at 15,000 levels, something like that. And it's very important to, when you're deploying a level, that it is of the right difficulty. If it's too easy, you don't generate any money from it. If it's too difficult, you start losing players. So having the right range of difficulty is very important. But you don't really know how difficult it is until you have your data back. But we wanted to build a bot that can actually predict the difficulty. And we did this in many iterations and invested a lot in how to do it. First, a simulation approach that didn't need any human data based on a multicolored tree search method. Then we replicated the imitation learning in the first AlphaGo paper. Just did it on a play model, still no human data. Then we trained that model on the simulation rollouts from the multicolored tree search. And at this point, we are convinced that, okay, we can actually build a bot that can do this quite well. We had iterated enough number of times to know that, okay, now we know how to build the right thing. And that's where we convinced the company to start their biggest tracking to that date, to track 1% of gameplay in Candy Crush for 2 weeks, gathering more than 1 billion state action pairs to train the eventual bot. And this has been running for more than 10,000 levels now in Candy Crush. To summarize this, so do the right thing sounds very obvious. So why are you here listening to me? It's all obvious. However, in all of these places, in the beginning, I've spent most of my time convincing people of how to approach solving the problems. So it sounds obvious, but very hard to do in reality. And building the wrong thing, I can't think of anything more useless than to spend a lot of energy building the perfect thing that nobody wants to use. So really, don't be too smart. No matter how smart you are, you're probably not smarter than the process of iteration and gathering feedback. So invest in knowing the right thing, but then you should absolutely take time to do the thing right, to build the right infrastructure and a solid infrastructure. Not perfect, but to a good infrastructure. But know your business. I mean, if you're in the business of building houses, you're not iterating on a single house. That will not go well. However, keep in mind that humankind has probably been iterating on house building for millennia. All right, hiring. You need the right people to be able to put this kind of iteration mindset in place. And I'll go through that. So, first day, how do you do the hiring? Do you find the smartest PhD graduates? Do you focus on engineering skills? Do you think about the managerial level first? Do you look for business acumen? How important are the smart skills, the soft skills? So these are all questions you start thinking about. And for all the Portuguese people, you probably remember this if you're not too young. So this is England losing on penalty shootouts. And they're probably best at losing at penalty shootouts in the world. But why do they always lose? There's so much pressure. The sort of the press and talk about football in England, it's so heavy that everyone is afraid, and they will never perform the best if they're afraid. So that's why they're afraid of missing the penalty, and that's why they miss the penalty. Right. So you really need to put in place psychological safety, and I often highlight it with this phrase: if you have a team that is unafraid of asking the stupid question, you have the right environment. If they're afraid of exposing that they can be wrong, then you don't have then you have fear in your team. And I think this is super important. Once you have this in place, innovation and feedback is much faster, team output significantly higher. However, individual contribution might be less obvious. And this can be difficult. If you have big egos, it just takes one big ego that really wants to look smart to shut down this mindset. And then everyone is afraid again. So when I do hiring, this has been my learnings. So I look at it as optimization with constraints. And in my mind, I try to optimize for soft skills and diversity. The technical knowledge is the constraint. This is very often the other way around. I'm not saying I'm lowering the bar for technical knowledge. The constraint is pretty high. But in practice, this means that once I'm maybe down to 2 candidates, one is slightly better in mathematics or some technical skill, the other is slightly sort of more of a team player, and I'm more certain about that they will up to the sort of ask the stupid question mentality, I would go for that one, right? So that's where this comes in place. It should also be taken into account that it's much easier to train the hard skills than to train the soft skills, right? Yeah, and I mean, some reasons for why it's often the other way around. It's so easy to measure the hard skills. It's very difficult to think about the soft skills and how to measure that. And diversity, we should just acknowledge it puts more work on the manager to manage a diverse team. There are very different opinions. It's very easy to hire your friends. It's nice, but the output is significantly worse from the team, in my opinion, in my experience. So, ask the stupid question team is really the key enabler for the do the right thing approach, where you can have this quick and frequent iterations where you're showing your cards early and you may look stupid. You might have stupid error, but you get feedback. So you're much faster that way, but you don't look nearly as smart. So that's a trade-off, right? That will run down much fewer sort of rabbit holes and spend less time in the holes, because the reason you run into a rabbit hole is that you're trying to come up with something perfect. There's much better knowledge sharing, and retention is much better. All right, now roles and structure. Which roles do you hire for? I mean, data engineers, data analysts, and a lot. How do you think about seniority? Do you hire a specialist or generalist? And then I've phrased this centralized or federated. I'll explain that in the next slide. So, first of all, when I talk about centralized, I'm talking about a data science team where everyone sits together. The knowledge sharing goes very fast. You are absolutely not building the same thing in many places. You know what the others are doing, and you have all the capability in place to build a sound infrastructure. When I talk about a federated setup, it's where you have data scientists embedded in product teams, for example, and they really know the pain points of the product teams. They're not just building or doing some academic exercises, they're answering the right questions. So both are very important. I claim that in a small organization, it's probably enough to have a centralized setup. You should know well enough the pain points of the teams. But as soon as you grow into a mid-sized company, you probably start setting up cross-functional teams, and you should think about trying to embed data scientists in the most important product teams. But I would recommend keeping in place some kind of a center of excellence where they can come back and share their knowledge, make sure they're not doing the same thing in multiple places. And you need to have resources for building infrastructure as well. Roles, I think everyone kind of agrees. If you're in a very young company, you need a generalist. They need to be able to wear many hats. It's kind of obvious. This learning that, in my opinion, it's good to have blurry lines between the roles. It helps a lot. You're not having a data engineering just say, I want my Jira ticket to be very fast. Just define what I need to do and I deliver it to you and then I'm out, I'm home. So I think it's much better to have it a little bit more blurry. It enables more communication and more iteration. If you set up a waterfall approach where you just hand something over and never look at it again, you're kind of sacrificing the communication and the iteration, right? So I absolutely hate waterfalls in companies. They're very awesome in nature, and especially when you can draw an AI-generated picture of it. And this should be obvious, I think, for a young company at least, all hands on deck. There is no room for a high-level manager that does PowerPoints. Sadly, I've become that person today, but that's later on. All right, but how do you get all of this done? You need to be able to communicate with the management. And this is probably the hardest learning for me. This has taken me the most time to understand how to do this. And I'm still learning. So please give me tips if you have some. I mean, how do you start? Do you just go, hey, trust me, I know what I'm doing? Or sell the perfect future vision and just give me 10 headcounts? Or as many do, just sell the incredible value of AI? Or do you just ask the management, what do you need? I mean, these are all viable options. I don't think any of them are actually very good. So, presentations. This I learned the hard way. I thought it was enough to talk to my manager, the CTO or CPO, and just tell them the right thing. That does not work. The language of management is presentations. You really spell it out. Create a presentation, go in there and just explain it. The presentation will get its own life and circulate around more management. Absolutely try to set up weekly meetings. You need to keep sort of the information flowing. I've learned this the hard way. I thought it was enough to meet once a month. It's too slow. Try to set up weekly meetings, absolutely. And you need to talk about what does speed and mistakes and iterations mean. I've had to spend a lot of time on this. Sort of, the business needs information now. It's better to have some information than none. And even if it has you just have to inform people about the uncertainty around what you already have. Don't keep it close, so you need speed, but speed creates mistakes. So be very clear, there will be mistakes. Now, this is often a hard sell. You can imagine. AI and machine learning, they're great. My experience, it doesn't really work unless you have great data and analytics. And in a young company, you usually have neither. The data is crap, and you're still trying to hire the analytical persons. And you really should try to educate the rest of the management, not just your immediate manager, because they need to talk and decide where to put money and what to do. And here's my little secret. I'm kind of sad that this is being recorded, so don't take it further. This has been my sort of biggest trick to get things done. So ask for forgiveness. The best way to prove a point is to show results. So asking for permission is not always the right way. Probably most of my the work I'm proudest of has started as a hackathon or a low-key side project, or I was able to convince someone to give me a master student to supervise for a few months. And this is a way to fast-track sort of high-impact projects that are low urgency. You need to be able to reshuffle the backlog for these projects to get any attention. Otherwise, they stay at the bottom of the backlog forever. And here are a few examples of what has come out of projects like this. So don't overuse it, then you get fired. don't capsize the sort of product roadmap. But this can be very useful in trying to shake things up a little bit if things are moving too slowly. So summary, build the right thing with iterations, get feedback, show your cards early. You need humble and open people for that. You should, once you know what to build, you should absolutely build that well. You should have robust and strong infrastructure, but never aim for the perfect. That's the enemy of done. Yep, as I said, you need people that are okay with exposing mistakes, that speeds everything up and actually is the key enabler for an iterative environment. And then explain to management how you will gradually, with many mistakes, build a good but never perfect infrastructure, but that can help you from day one. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. It was wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So I have a few questions here.
Yep.
And audience, please continue to submit your questions, okay, so that we can consider them. I do have a question first. So I completely relate with these. And one challenge that I have sometimes is that if you want to create something more disruptive, it requires a little bit more of vision and top-down thinking.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's hard to articulate being pragmatic and at the same time developing that vision and that sort of, it's not waterfall, but it's more waterfallish.
Yeah.
So how do you go about balancing these things?
No, I agree. I mean, some projects are just require more resources than to go the ask for forgiveness approach. Absolutely. And then that's all about communication. I would probably not start with such a project. You need to gain the trust of the management first. So once you have proven them a few times, okay, I actually know what I'm doing, then you can start to sell this idea. I've tried this a few times. I've failed many times trying to convince the management about something bigger like this. So I don't really have the magic bullet for this, but no, absolutely, it's a lot of it is about trust and being able to speak the language of management, I think.
And not being the idiot new joiner, right? The new joiner that arrives and starts to, you know what, we should do everything differently. And by the way, this big initiative, we should totally support this. That makes sense. And I have another question. So it's really important for teams to avoid doing silent work. And oftentimes, if you are not sharing failures, if you are not sharing the things that did not go according to plan, oftentimes you may go a long time without reporting results because you are waiting for the true good result to present the work. So how do you go about managing that?
I think it's a big part of creating this sort of ask the stupid question environment. So if you are safe enough to just be stupid and be wrong, then you don't really have that problem. You are able to show your cards early. So this is where I'm heading with this. What do you think? Because otherwise you sort of, okay, I want to show something perfect and don't laugh at me. I don't want to show this. That's the mentality that makes this really happen. Right.
I agree.
And then encourage sort of when someone really admits to something. We had a hackathon the other day. Some guys sort of spent the whole time trying to do something with ChatGPT and then came back. It all failed. And just then use the opportunity and just, awesome, great. That was, you should really share that. You should celebrate that.
Celebrating failure, I think absolutely. It's a huge part of it. So let me open the floor for questions from the audience proper. So the first question that we have is, how do you go about explaining to stakeholders the importance of a center of excellence?
I've had this discussion a lot of time. Good question. Because what happens is that as soon as you grow, different product teams, different parts of the companies start saying, I need an analyst here. And you really need to fight against, we should not split into multiple data teams. That's probably the single most common reason for people leaving and frustration between data scientists. I know if you're a huge company, you need to have something like this, but a mid-sized company should not need to have this. So you need to explain that, okay, for infrastructure, you need something central. For answering the right questions, you need something sort of out in the teams. But these are the two extremes. But both have big flaws. I mean, if you're only here, you don't build any infrastructure and you're answering same things again and again. If you're only here, you're just doing academic exercises. You need something in the middle. So that's the argument I've been using.
I love that. Then if the team is admitting mistakes to the management team, and the management team is still a little bit skeptical about data and AI, that may create some friction, right?
Yes.
So how do you go about, where is the boundary between sharing and oversharing when it comes to failure, particularly upwards?
That's a good point. I try to overshare upwards.
I like that as well.
But maybe I try to take most of the heat so that it doesn't go into the team. So they continue to be unafraid of making mistakes. So I'm fine. I'm pretty convinced that we need to run fast and make mistakes. It's of course different I mean, if you're in an environment where you sort of you're building something very specific and it has to be absolutely accurate. It might be slightly different, but many companies building apps and whatever they're doing can actually be a little bit more sort of able to do mistakes.